Thank you for joining us here on God's Guiding Light, where people who have joined the church, who have found their way to the gospel, share their conversion stories. I personally really, that's my favorite thing about what I like to call Open Mic Sunday, testimony meeting. Every once in a while, you get somebody up who will just tell their conversion story, and that's what really touches me. So I asked Larry, who lives in East Texas somewhere, to come onto the show, and he said that he would love to, and I appreciate it. Hey, Larry, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So now I was just telling everybody that you were in you live in East Texas now, right?
Right.
I'd like to know your life before finding the gospel. What was that like? Were you always in East Texas? Where were you?
Raised in East Texas, kind of between. Sometimes we lived in Fort Worth, sometimes in Sulphur Springs, but basically always in that area of Texas. Finished high school in Fort Worth, and then left. The only reason I say this because it's kind of integral to the part of the conversion is went to Houston, and they had this really interesting billboard that said, I was working at the Houston Zoo, by the way. It was a wonderful job. And I saw this billboard that said, we need 1,000 new faces. And those new faces were for the Houston Police Department. So I happened to have a new face. So I went and joined. And I worked there for 10 years.
At the police department?
At the police department as an officer.
And what can I ask what you're doing at you said the zoo, right? Is that the Houston Zoo?
Houston Zoo. I was a zookeeper. Mm-hmm. Great job. I loved working with the animals.
Okay, here's an aside. Which animals were you working with and which did you really enjoy?
Well, I started out working in the bird department, which was really interesting. But then an opening came up and I finished the time I was there working with actually a 4-year-old Indian elephant. Mm-hmm. She was in the children's zoo, and I was one of 2 keepers that took care of her.
Nice.
That was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed that. She was great.
Developed a trusting relationship with the animal. I hear they're smart. Is that correct?
Super intelligent. I mean, she was typical example. She was walking around her pen while I was cleaning it once, and the public was along the edge of the little stockade. And as she would walk around, she would step on my foot. Well, an Indian elephant's foot will spread out, so it didn't hurt. It was just she was just trying to get my goat. Yeah. And we played like that all the time. She was very interesting, but she'd step on that thing, and we carried this little stick with us, and I would pull it out and I'd go, stop that. And she would lift up her leg and blink, putting on a show for all the public out there to see that I was being mean and abusive toward her. Oh. Although I never laid she was very intelligent.
All right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. What was her name?
Well, she had a public name, but the private name, so that we knew the keepers were Katu.
Very nice, very nice. I didn't mean to get you off your story. I just wanted to hear about the zookeepering.
Oh, that was awesome work. I really enjoyed that.
Okay, so you went from the zoo to the police department in Houston because they needed 1,000 new faces.
Right. That was the draw. They needed that, and like I said, they were doing a massive hiring. And I joined and worked there. And while I was there, I was working a part-time job, which is apart from your regular 8-hour shift. And it was at a Catholic university. And at this university, we just pretty much, different officers worked there at different times, just kind of being there for security. I noticed in this one area of the university, there was a young lady that worked at a desk, and I would walk by and I saw her every time I worked, and she had this absolutely beatific smile, and just wonderful person, just sweet as all could be. And I noticed she had this interesting picture on her desk. Okay. It was a building, and I asked her what that building was, and she told me it was the temple in Houston. And of course, I'm like, what temple? And she was so glad to tell me about it.
Did you have a religious background before you asked her about this?
My grandmother was LDS, but my mother was not, and would not let us have anything to do with the church. I know now. At the time, I just accepted it. We went to numerous churches in my growing up years. Different churches. My mom was always searching for something, and so I had a little experience with a lot of different denominations, but not with the LDS, not with Latter-day Saints.
Gotcha.
And so here it was. I started talking to her about it, and she was the perfect missionary. She was just so full of light that you could see her, that beautiful soul shining through. And here it was. I was not living a very clean life at the time. I was a young police officer, and if you know anything about police officers, you walk through this mess of the world that we're in, and you see so many things that you can't unsee, and if you're not very, very careful, it starts sticking to you. And I was raised by two wonderful parents that were great, and I learned some really awful. I never cussed in my life until I joined the police department. I learned to be very prolific with it. And
very nice.
It was awful. You begin to use it like a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned later that was totally unnecessary. But at the time, I was kind of taught this is how you have to deal with some of the situations that you're in.
Right. You're dealing with rough characters. You need to use the rough language. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That was the thought. I know now that you don't have to do that. But at the time, I fell victim to that. And not victim, I did it myself, but it was because that was what I was this is the way you do it.
This is still in Houston now as a policeman.
Still in Houston.
Okay. And so you're moonlighting at night, and this young lady has told you about, did she tell you about the temple and its purpose, or what did she do?
Touched on it enough to the point where she asked me if I would like to speak to the missionaries. And I said, yes. How do I say this? It was a pretty bad time, because it's one thing to know the gospel and do something about it. Mm-hmm. Quite differently to know the gospel and go, no, this is not for me right now. But knowing that it's true, because once I spoke to the missionaries, I knew it was true. It was like a light opened up. Everything they said just felt like stuff I've always thought about, but just didn't know. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful to realize that there was this purpose that I wasn't aware of, but that I had always suspected. I'm a prolific reader, so I've read a lot of things, but this really hit home. And I was very interested. But at the time, I was married to a young lady that didn't want anything to do with the church. She would have nothing to do with it. And and this was at a time when I was about to leave Houston. I left Houston and came back to Fort Worth and joined that police department. Okay. And I worked there for 22 years. But it was kind of a bad timing. When I left Houston, I left that support group of people I had first gotten in contact with in the church.
Right.
Got to Houston, and because of everything going on there, starting a new job and everything, I fell away and didn't have anything to do with the church for years.
So at what point did you join the church then, when you were in Houston?
Yes.
Or did you wait until you got to Fort Worth? Okay.
Houston.
I
was baptized in Houston. Like I said, I can make all the excuses in the world, but my wife at the time just would not have anything to do with it. And so I didn't have the ability to just do it on my own. Yeah, she wanted no part of it. And
so you joined the church over her misgivings?
Yes, I got baptized. Yes.
Okay. And then you moved to Fort Worth.
Then I moved to Fort Worth. Yes. And when I got to Fort Worth, I was having to go through their academy.
Right.
And therefore, between that and studying on the weekends, I had absolutely no time and I never went, and it just, by not going, it kind of became the habit, and I ended up working there 22 years without almost any activity.
So you joined the church and then you moved and were inactive for 20 years plus.
Basically, yes, that number of years.
Wow. And that didn't weigh on you? Did you think about it?
Periodically it did, but when life just gets so involved, you just don't. And especially when you work around the type of people that I've had to work with,
Right.
it's not something that you don't sit around and talk about gospel experiences. That's not the kind of police war stories you usually hear.
So now you're in the second police department. You're in Fort Worth, and you're inactive. Where does the story go from here?
Interesting. Interesting. You should ask that. I was at that time I was single, and I was talking to this young lady that was working in the juvenile division, and I had an injury, so I was working in the evidence lab and property room actually. And
Okay.
I went to I used to stop by there and see her and talk. She was a sweet lady, just had the same kind of smile that this young missionary that I had met before.
Got
But
it.
I didn't know who she was. Just another police officer, a female officer. And one day I happened to come in to say hi to her, and I sat down, and she was on the phone, and she was talking to somebody, and the wording she used made me realize, wait a minute, that sounds like a Mormon.
Yeah.
So when she got off the phone, I asked her, what religion are you? And she said, later she told me that she figured I was going to walk out the door as soon as she said it, but she said she was a Latter-day Saint. And I said, so am I.
Oh, nice.
And we ended up getting married.
Well, score. Good for you.
That was a wonderful experience. She was a really sweet woman. She lived the gospel. She had a great conversion story herself. And I ended up adopting her son, and we had a great life until she passed away.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well,
That's nice. So she got you back into church. Did you start going to church with her?
yes.
So I guess Lord knew where to put her for you to run into her.
Yeah.
That's great.
Exactly. Who would have thought?
How's your life different now that you're involved in the gospel?
Well, as different as night as day. There's when you live in the physical world, and you deal with people, and you try to be as honest and fair as you can be in whatever you do, which is really important in law enforcement, in my opinion. But you don't get a lot of feedback, and so a lot of times things you do, you never find out, what happened.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
There's really no follow up after you
did some good. You don't know if the good you did actually had long lasting effects, or
exactly. But what changed drastically was my perception, because I started seeing the light instead of the dark, and it was so nice to be at church and be around people that were like minded, and
yeah.
It's like recharging your batteries.
Wow, I can't imagine being a policeman and seeing all that. I don't know, what would you say, ugliness? Would that be a good word for that?
It's like wading through the worst kind of stuff you can imagine and trying not to let it stick to you.
Yeah, I can't imagine going through that and only seeing darkness and not getting to see the light. So you were still a policeman once you became active again. Did anybody that you were working with notice the change in you?
Yeah. There was a few the regular guys that I hung around, that they could tell that it was a difference, just because sometimes toward the end of my career, it was such a darkness in me that one of my fellow officers actually took me to the police psychologist to talk to him, because he was afraid I was going to do something to myself.
Wow.
I was in a deep depression after a marriage had broke up and didn't have contact with my kids, and it was a rough time.
So what are you up to now? I guess you're still active, yes?
Still active. I've been married to this wonderful woman. She's it's interesting how I met her. I met her on FarmersOnly.com.
Okay.
She was the only one brave enough to put on there that she was LDS.
Oh, wow.
And so I contacted her, and we got to talking and got to meeting, and she just wanted a friend, and I just needed somebody to talk to. And it blossomed into true love. And now we've been married for 6 years.
Congratulations. Good for you. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Any part of the story that we skipped over? Any words you'd like to give to our audience, for maybe people who are looking to find the gospel or aren't sure about it? Any words of wisdom or guidance you might have?
Just especially for people who work in the type of career that I had. I mean, I did 32 years of law enforcement, and I didn't mention the fact that about 3 years of that was crime scene. Mm-hmm. So I've seen just about every manner of death you can imagine, and you have to not let that darkness take over you. You look for the light, and the light is from our Savior.
Very nice. Well, Larry, I appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this with me, and I'm glad to have you as a brother. And thanks a lot. I think this is a very inspiring story.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.